Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a former marshal who had lost all hope the old way. James Harker was about to end his life when a mysterious woman pursued by the Blackwood Brothers entered the saloon, but no one expected what would happen next. Please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're listening to this story from. The Last Drink, Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1885. The whiskey burned all the way down, just as James Harker intended. He'd been drinking since noon. His thoughts remained stubbornly. The Rusty Nail Saloon hummed with activity around him, cards shuffling, glasses clinking, women laughing, but he heard it all as if from underwater, distant and muffled. Outside, rain lashed against the windows as thunder rolled across the Wyoming sky. "Another," he growled, sliding his empty glass at the scarred bar top. The bartender, a bald man with arms like tree trunks, shook his head. "You've had enough." James fixed him with a cold stare. "I'll tell you when I've had enough." "Your funeral," the bartender, pouring another 2 fingers of amber liquid. James almost smiled at that. The man had no idea how right he was. His fingers absently traced the outline of his Colt Peacemaker, the pearl handle smooth as callous. One more drink, then a short walk into the rain, and he'd finally silenced the screams that had haunted him. The door to the saloon burst open, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain. James didn't bother turning around. Just another cowboy seeking shelter from the storm. But the sudden hush that fell over the room caught his attention. That's when he heard the footsteps, light, quick, distinctly feminine. "Whiskey," said a voice behind him, low and breathless, "and information." James turned, more out of curiosity than interest. The woman standing at the bar was soaking wet, her burgundy dress clinging to curves that would have captured his full attention a year ago. Auburn hair, darkened by rain, framed a face that belonged on a painting, not in this godforsaken corner of Wyoming Territory. But it was her eyes that held him, emerald green and filled with something he recognized immediately: desperation. The bartender seemed equally stunned. "What kind of information, miss?" "I need to hire a guide." Her gaze swept the room, lingering on someone who knows the territory, someone good with a gun. James turned back. Whatever trouble she was in, it wasn't his not anymore. "You won't find that sort here later, paying in something other than." Laughter rippled through the room. The woman ignored it, her focus remaining on the bartender. "I'm looking for James Harker," she said, her voice unwavering despite the room's growing hostility. "I was told he's in town." The glass froze halfway to James's lips. He hadn't heard that, his full name, spoken aloud in months. Most folks in town just called him Harker, if they addressed him at all. The ones who knew his past avoided him entirely. "Who's asking?" Out turning. He felt her presence as she moved beside him, smelled a faint trace of lavender beneath the scent of rain. "My name is Catherine Blackwood," she said quietly. "I need your help, Marshal Harker." James laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You're about a year too late, Blackwood. I'm not a marshal anymore. I know what happened in Denver," her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "But I also know you're the only man who can help me." He turned to face her fully now, studying with cold eyes. Up close he could see the light freckles her nose, the small scar on her, visible where her dress had slipped slightly, but there was steel beneath that. "Whatever you've heard about, the truth is worse. Find someone else." "There is no one else, and I can." She reached and withdrew of bills, placing them on the more money than seen in. Turning in. Before he could respond, the saloon doors creaked again. 3 men entered. Waters, the lead man. The way the room quieted, everything. Trouble had just walked in, and it was looking for something, or someone. Catherine's sharp intake of breath confirmed his suspicion. She turned away quickly, her hand moving to her side, as if reaching for a weapon that wasn't. Well, said the pockmarked man, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Looks like our search is over, boys. Miss Blackwood, you've led us on quite a chase." James should have stayed out of it. Whatever this woman was mixed up in, it wasn't his fight. He had his own appointment to keep, with a bottle and his Colt in some quiet corner of the storm. But as the 3 men spread out, hands hovering near their holsters, something long dormant stirred inside him. Maybe it was the whiskey. Maybe it was the green-eyed woman trembling slightly beside him. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the faint echo of the man he used to be. "Evening, gentlemen," James said, turning on his stool to face them. "Nasty night to—" "Can I buy you a drink?" The leader's eyes flicked him, dismissive. "This doesn't concern you, friend." "Actually," James said, reaching for his glass, "I think it does." He drained the whiskey in one swallow, feeling the burn center him. "The lady and I were just discussing business." "The lady," the man spat, "stole something that belongs to my employer. We've come to collect it." And her. Catherine stiffened. I took nothing that wasn't already mine, Reeves. The man Reeves smiled, revealing teeth. Mr. Blackwood disagrees. Now come along quietly, and we won't have to make a mess of this fine establishment. James stood slowly, his movement drawing all eyes. Even half drunk, he cut an imposing figure. Blackwood? He asked, glancing. As in Emmett Blackwood, her voice. Yes, my husband. That explained a lot. Emmett Blackwood was one of the wealthiest men in the territory, a cattle baron with political aspiration and a reputation for ruthless. James had never met the man, but he'd heard stories, none of them good. Mrs. Blackwood and I have unfinished business, surprising. So unless you want trouble, I suggest you boys deliver a message to your boss. Tell him his wife has hired herself some protection. Reeves laughed, but James caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. You don't look like much, mister. Who exactly are you? Before James could answer, the bartender spoke up. That's James Harker, you fool, the marshal from Denver. A heavy silence fell over. James saw recognition, followed by something that might have been Harker, Reeves said, his hand drifting away his gun. The one who took down the Carson gang? James didn't answer. He didn't need to. His reputation, was left of it, still carried weight. Even here. Reeves exchanged glances with his companions. This isn't over. Mr. Blackwood wants what's his. We'll be back, with more men. I look forward to it. Though he felt no anticipation, just a familiar deadness. The three men backed toward the door, unwilling to turn their backs on him. When they finally exited into the storm, the room collectively exhaled. Catherine's hand touched his arm, light as a feather. Thank you, she said, but they will be back. James looked down at her, at the fear and determination mingled in those green eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. Whatever appointment he'd had with his colt could wait another day. Then we'd better not be here when they return, he said. Tell me what you took from your husband, Mrs. Blackwood, and why he wants it back badly enough to send men after you. She hesitated, glancing around at the curious faces watching. Not here, whispered. I have a room at the boarding house. I'll explain everything there. James nodded, retrieving his hat from the bar. Let's go then. As they stepped out into the rain, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking away from one death sentence and straight into another. But for the first time in a year, he felt something other than the crushing weight of guilt. It wasn't hope. He was still too broken for that. But it was something close to purpose, and for tonight that would have to be enough. Dangerous secret. The boarding house stood 3 blocks from the saloon, a modest 2-story building with peeling white paint. By the time they reached the covered porch, both were soaked to the skin. James kept his hand near his holster, eyes scanning the darkened street. Nothing moved except the rain. Second floor, end of the hall, Catherine, her teeth chattering slightly. Inside, a sleepy-eyed proprietress glanced up from her knitting, eyebrows rising at the sight of James accompanying her female guest. Catherine nodded politely but offered no explanation as they climbed the staircase. The room was small but clean, a bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a single chair beside a window overlooking the muddy. A kerosene lamp cast a warm glow over worn floral wallpaper. You should change, James said, turning his back as Catherine retrieved a folded nightgown and robe, a small trunk. Turn around, she said after. She'd wrapped herself in a deep blue robe, her wet dress draped over the chair to dry. Her hair, still damp, hung in loose waves past her shoulders. Without the fine dress, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but no less beautiful. Your turn, she said, handing him a towel. You're dripping on my floor. James removed his but kept his shirt on despite its clinging wetness. He dried his hair roughly with the towel, then sat on the edge. Now, tell me what I've gotten myself into. Catherine perched on the bed, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. How much do you know about Emmett Blackwood? Cattle baron, rich as sin. Wants to be governor someday. James shrugged. Rumor says he's not particular about how he gets what he wants. The rumors are incomplete. She rose and moved to the trunk again, removing a false bottom to reveal a leather portfolio. From it she extracted several folded documents. 2 years ago I was a school teacher in Denver. Emmett was visiting on business. He was charming, wealthy, promised me the world. A bitter smile crossed her. I was young and foolish enough to believe him. What changed? Everything once the ring was on my finger. She handed him the document. These are land deeds, 15 parcels throughout Wyoming territory, all in Emmett's name. James flipped through them, not understanding the significance. So? They're forged, she said simply. The original owners, mostly small farmers and ranchers, never sold their land. Some were threatened. Others were found dead after mysterious accident. James looked up sharply. You're accusing your husband of murder? I'm accusing him of worse. These 15 parcels form a perfect line through the... Do you know what's coming through Wyoming, Mark? The railroad, James read, suddenly standing. These properties control the most viable route, she nodded. Whoever owns that land can demand any price from the railroad company. Emmett stands to make millions. He also has a senator and 2 territorial judges in his pocket. James whistled softly. That's quite an accusation against a powerful man. I heard him planning it. Late one night, he was drinking with his brother. Connor Blackwood? James interrupted, his interest sharpening. Yes, you know him? James's face hardened. We've crossed paths. Connor Blackwood was a gunslinger with a reputation nearly as black as his name. James had almost arrested him once in Denver before everything fell apart. Emmett thought I was asleep, continued. They were discussing which judge to bribe next, which rancher might need more persuasion. She hugged herself. The next day, that rancher was found trampled by his own cattle. James set the papers aside. So you took the deeds and ran. Not immediately. I spent months gathering evidence, copying document. Emmett was away. Her eyes flashed with unexpected. I was raised by a father who believed in justice, Marshal. I couldn't stand by while innocent people lost their land, their lives. How did he catch on? A letter I wrote to the territorial governor was intercepted. She smiled grimly. I managed to grab the deeds and some money before Emmett realized what I knew. I've been running for 3 weeks. James leaned back, studying her. The story was incredible, yet something in her eyes spoke of truth. Or perhaps he simply wanted to believe her. Why me? He asked. There are other guns for hire. Catherine hesitated. Because you have a reputation for honesty, and because, she faltered. Because you have nothing left to lose, she said softly. The words hit him like a physical blow. She was right, of course. A year ago he'd had everything. Respect, purpose. Now he had a half-empty bottle of whiskey and a loaded gun. I need to reach Cheyenne, she continued. There's a federal marshal who can't be bought. With these deeds and my testimony, Emmett can be stopped. Cheyenne's 100 miles away, James, through Blackwood territory. I know it's asking. A sound from outside silenced. James moved to the window, peering through rain-streaked glass at the darkened street below. A horse and rider passed slowly, the man's face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. We can't stay here. Reeves and his men will have this place surrounded by morning. Where can we go? They'll be watching the livery stage. The stage depot. I know a place, James interrupted. An old line shack about 5 miles north of town. We can hole up there, plan our next move. Catherine nodded, already moving to gather her things. How soon can we leave? Now, under cover of the storm. As she quickly changed behind a wooden screen, James found himself wondering what madness had possessed him. This woman's cause, however just, wasn't his fight. Emmett Blackwood wasn't a man to cross lightly, and yet the hollow emptiness that had been his constant companion for the last year seemed to have receded, replaced by something that felt dangerous. I'm ready. Emerging in a simple riding dress, her few possessions packed in a small valise. The deeds were secured inside a waterproof pouch tied around her waist beneath her clothes. Stay close, James instructed, checking his peacemaker before returning it. And if I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Her eyes met his, steady and determined. I won't abandon you, Marshal. James, he corrected her. I'm not a marshal anymore. What happened in Denver? Quietly. The rumors are probably true, he cut her off, and that's all you need to know. They slipped out through the back stairs into an alley slick with mud and rain. The storm had intensified, sheets of water cascading from a black sky split occasionally by lightning, perfect cover for 2 people who needed to disappear. As they made their way toward the edge of town, James felt a familiar tension building in his muscle, the heightened awareness that kept him along countless dangers. For the first time since Denver, the sensation wasn't unwelcome. Whatever the morning might bring, tonight he had a reason to stay alive. Pursued. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Wyoming hills. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape, mud-slicked trails and swollen streams, where dusty paths had been the day before. The line shack stood alone on a small rise, weathered gray boards barely visible against the rocky. Years ago it had sheltered cowboys working the northern section of what was now Blackwood Range. Long abandoned, it offered little comfort, a rusted stove, and a single cot with a straw mat. James stood in the doorway watching the eastern sky lighten. They'd reached the shack just before midnight. After a grueling trek, Catherine had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhaustion finally overtaking her iron determination. James had remained awake, his body accustomed to long nights. "Any sign of pursuit?" Catherine's voice came from behind him, still husky. "Nothing yet," James replied, "but they'll be coming." She moved beside him, her hair looser. In the soft morning light, the freckles scattered across her nose seemed more pronounced, lending a girlish quality to her otherwise feature. "How long before we move on? We need horses, food." James nodded toward the hills to the small ranch. "Old man Jeffers, a friend one." "Was?" James' mouth tightened. "Haven't seen him since I lost my badge." Catherine studied his profile, the hard line of the shadow, what really. For a long moment, when he finally spoke, devoid of emotion. "I killed a man, the wrong man." She waited, sensing there was a bank. "3 men, armed. I pursued them into an alley." His fingers tightened on the doorframe. "It was raining, like last night. Dark. I saw a figure raise a gun. I fired. It wasn't one of the robbers," Catherine guessed quietly. James shook his head. A boy, 16 years old, son of a local shopkeeper, he'd found one of the robbers' dropped revolvers. The silence stretched between them. "It was an accident," Catherine said finally. "Tell that to his parents." James' voice was bitter. "I turned in my badge the next day. The territorial governor was happy to accept my resignation, kept things quiet. So you came here to drink yourself to..." He looked at her then, surprised by her directness. "Something like that." Catherine held his gaze. "My father was a lawman, too. He taught me that a badge doesn't make the man. It just shows everyone else who he already is." "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." A shadow passed over her face. "Until Emmett's men killed him." James straightened. "You didn't mention that before." "He was the marshal in a small Montana town. Started asking questions about cattle that went missing after Emmett's men drove their herds through." Her voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "They found him with a bullet in his back, called it a hunting accident. That's why you married Blackwood," James realized. "You were looking for evidence." She nodded. "I thought I could find proof from the inside." "I never expected to fall in love with him." "No." Her eyes flashed, "to discover how deep the corruption went. Emmett doesn't just want money, James. He wants power. The governor's office is just the beginning." Where James could respond, a sound, his attention, the distant thunder of hoofbeats. He moved quickly to the small window on the western side of the shack. "Riders," he said, reaching for his peacemaker. "At least 4, maybe more." Catherine joined him at the window. "Reeves?" "Can't tell yet." James assessed their position with a lawman's eye. The shack offered little protection, thin walls that wouldn't stop a determined bullet. The only advantage was the elevated position and clear sight lines in all directions. "We need to move," Catherine, already gathering her meager belongings. James shook his head. "Too late for that. Spot us on open ground." The riders were visible now, 5 men moving at a steady pace toward the shack. James recognized Reeves at the front, his pockmarked face distinctive, even at a distance. "How did they find us so quickly?" Catherine whispered. "Someone in town have talked." James checked his ammunition. 6 bullets in the peacemaker, another 12 in his belt. Not enough if it came to a prolonged fight. He made a quick decision. "There's a narrow ravine behind the shack, leads up into the hills. When I engage them, you run. Keep the rising sun at..." "I told you before. I won't abandon you." "This isn't a debate, Catherine." His voice hardened. "Those deeds are the only proof against your husband. They need to reach Cheyenne." She started to protest, but the determination in his eyes silenced her. "What about you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I'll be right behind you." She knew he was lying. "Why are you doing this? Last night you were ready to end your own life." James considered the surprised to find the answer came easy. "Maybe saving your life will balance the scales a bit for the one eye." The riders were close, spreading out to approach the shack from multiple angles. James positioned himself by the door, peacemaker ready. "The ravine," he reminded her. "Don't stop until you reach the hills." Catherine stood frozen for a moment, conflict visible on her face. Then, with sudden decisiveness, she stepped forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, but intense, catching James entirely by surprise. "That's not for goodbye," said fiercely. "That's a promise to finish what we started." Before he could respond, she was gone, slipping through the back window toward the ravine beyond. James turned his attention to the approaching riders. They had stopped about 50 yards from the shack, gathering in a loose semicircle. Reeves urged his horse forward a few paces. "Harker," he called, "we know you're in there. Send out the woman and the documents, and you can ride away from this." James remained silent, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. 5 against 1 weren't odds he'd normally consider, but his only goal now was to— "Last chance, Harker," Reeves shouted, "or we burn you out." James took a deep breath, memories of Denver flashing through his mind, the rain, the darkness, the fatal mistake. This time, there would be no mistakes. These men had made their choice. "Come and get me," he muttered, stepping in. Peacemaker raised. The first shot split the morning air. Redemption. Gunfire erupted from all sides. James ducked back inside as bullets splintered the wooden doorframe. He counted 5 shooters, each taking cover behind boulders or their horses. Reeves was shouting orders, directing his men to surround the small structure. James took careful aim through a crack in the wall and fired. One of Blackwood's men cried out, clutching his shoulder as he fell behind a rock. 4 left. "That the best you got, Harker?" Reeves called out. "We can do this all day." James didn't waste breath responding. He moved to another position, keeping low. Catherine should be well into the ravine by now, making her way toward the hills. All he needed to do was hold them off long enough for her to reach safety. A flaming arrow arced through the air, landing on the shack's roof with a dull thud. Within seconds, the dry wood began to smoke. They were trying to flush him out. James fired again, catching a man trying to circle behind the shack. The shot wasn't clean. The man stumbled, but kept moving, disappearing from view. James cursed under his breath. 3.5. Smoke began to fill the smoke. The roof wouldn't last long. James had to move, but stepping outside meant exposing himself to multiple shooters. His gaze fell on the worn floorboards. Maybe another way. Using his boot heel, he pried up a loose board, then another. The space beneath the shack was narrow, but navigable. As flames began to lick at the rafters, James slipped into the crawl space, inching toward the back of the building. "He's running!" someone shouted. They'd spotted movement. Catherine, fleeing through the ravine. James emerged from beneath the shack just as 2 of Reeves's men broke from cover, racing toward the narrow gap in the rocks. With deadly precision, James fired twice. Both men fell. 1 down, 1 mortally wounded. The odds were evening. 2 against 1 now. Reeves and the man James had wounded earlier, but his position was exposed, and his peacemaker held only 1 bullet. A shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt inches from his boot. James rolled behind a boulder as Reeves fired again, the slug ricocheting off stone with a whine. "It's over, Harker," Reeves shouted, his voice tight with fury. "Nowhere left to run." The shack was fully engulfed now, orange flames leaping against the blue morning sky. Black smoke billowed upward, visible for miles. If there was anyone within range to help, they'd see it. But in this empty stretch of Wyoming, help was unlikely. James reloaded quickly, his fingers finding the spare bullets in his belt. 6 shots again. Better odds. A movement caught his eye. The wounded man was crawling toward a fallen rifle. James aimed carefully and fired. The man collapsed, motionless, 1-on-1. "Just you and me now, Reeves," James called out, breaking his silence. "And soon just me," came the— "Blackwood's gonna pay me extra for bringing back your head." James scanned the terrain, trying to locate his opponent. Reeves had taken cover behind a large boulder 30 yards away. Between them lay open ground, scattered with smaller rocks and scrub brush. No easy approach. "Tell me something," James said, playing for time. "How much does Blackwood pay a man to murder innocent ranchers?" A harsh laugh answered him. "Enough. And when the railroad comes through, we'll all be rich men. Except the ones you killed. Business is business, Marshal." "Oh, wait. You ain't a marshal anymore, are you? Just a drunk with a guilty conscience." James didn't rise to the bait. He'd spotted something, a faint movement in the hills beyond the ravine, a flash of burgundy against the gray-green scrub. Catherine hadn't fled. She was circling back. Fool woman, brave, but a fool. He needed to keep Reeves's attention focused on him. "I'm curious, does Blackwood know you're burning down his property?" "This worthless shack?" Scoffed. "He owns half the territory, soon to be more." "Not? They won't?" Reeves hardened. "The woman won't make it 10 miles. He seemed pretty determined to me." Reeves laughed. "Well, determination won't stop Connor Blackwood. He's already riding to cut her off at Miller's Creek." James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Connor Blackwood was a killer, pure and simple. If he caught Catherine— A shot rang out, but not from Reeves' position. From the hillside. Catherine. The bullet struck nowhere near Reeves, but it accomplished what James suspected was her real goal: distraction. Reeves spun toward the new threat, firing blindly at the hills. In that moment of divided attention, James broke from, closing the distance between them in rapid stride. Reeves turned back too late. James's first bullet caught him in the chest. His second ensured he wouldn't rise again. Silence fell across the burning homestead, broken only by the crackling of flames. James stood over Reeves's body, his gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. James! Catherine was running toward him, a small derringer clutched in her hand. Her face was smudged with dirt, her dress torn, but her eyes shone with fierce triumph. "I told you to run," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only relief. "I don't take orders well," she replied, slightly breathless. "Never have." "Connor Blackwood is heading for Miller's Creek," James said, holstering his weapon. "If we're going to reach Cheyenne, we need to avoid that route." Catherine nodded. "There's another way, through Devil's Canyon. It adds a day to the journey, but no one would expect us to take it." He looked down at the horses Reeves and his men had ridden in on. 5 mounts, saddled and ready. Providence or luck. It didn't matter which. "We should move," Catherine, glancing. "That smoke can be seen for miles." James nodded, but something made him hesitate. He turned back to look at the blazing structure, remembering how close he'd come to ending his life. The man who had walked into the rusty nail saloon yesterday wouldn't recognize the one sitting here now. "What is it?" Following him, just thinking about second chances. She studied him, understanding in her eyes. "They're rare. Best not to waste them." James met her gaze. "I don't intend to." They selected the 2 strongest horses and mounted up. The road to Cheyenne would be dangerous. Connor Blackwood, and who knew how many others hunting them. The odds weren't good, but for the first time in a year, James Harker felt truly alive. Whether it was the woman beside him, the cause they fought for, or simply the chance to make amends for past mistakes, he couldn't say. Perhaps it was all of these things. As they rode east, leaving the burning shack behind, James knew only one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with clear eyes and a steady hand. The time for running was over.